Ja, vi befinner oss i norra London utanför en av vallokalerna dit britterna idag går för att avlägga sina röster. Vi ska tala nu med CNN Money's Europe editor Nina dos Santos. Nina, very good to talk to you.
Thank you very much, Tom.
It's been a very short and intense campaign. What is your takeaway so far?
It has just 8 weeks in a snap election that Theresa May, the Prime Minister, said she wasn't planning on calling until having another one of her famous U-turns. The main takeaway message has been that this is an election that when people originally saw it on the cards, probably thought it was going to be rather dull and lacklustre. Theresa May appeared to be capitalising on the strongest position that her party was facing, according to opinion polls at the time, since all the way back in Margaret Thatcher's day, 1983, when she had a massive landslide win. But what we know is that it's become quite a bit more exciting, especially after the last 2 or 3 weeks when the polls have narrowed significantly. When Theresa May went into this election, opinion polls seemed to indicate that she would get a 20-point difference over the nearest opposition, the Labour Party. Well, now that lead has evaporated, according to the latest polls, to just 3, or maybe even as little as 1 point.
There was some concern just after the election was called that voters might be exhausted after one general election, 2 referendums, several local elections as well. So what do you think? Will the British public turn out to the polling stations today?
Well, that's the big question for all of us reporters here outside polling stations like this one here in North London, one of 40,000 polling stations where Britons are casting their votes. What I can tell you is that in the last general election, which again, as you point out quite rightfully, Thomas, was only 2 years ago, and we have had other votes between now and then, big ones like the referendum on EU membership, is that at that time voter turnout was around about 2/3 of the eligible population to vote, so 66% plus. In this particular constituency it was slightly higher than that, 67.3% of people eligible to vote turned out. But I can say that more people have actually registered for this election than in 2015. So that gives you a good indication that people do seem to be quite interested. Also, when it comes to voter turnout among the young, that'll be crucial, particularly for mobilising Labour Party supporters. Jeremy Corbyn has a lot of young voters who are very much pro his cause. The big question is, will they actually turn out to vote? When it comes to 18 to 24-year-olds, some of them who are voting for the first time, more than 1 million of them have signed up to register for this election. But last time, if you look at voter turnout for the youth population, it was only 43% against, as I said, that national average of 66%.
So what is this election really about? Is it about building a stronger country, or is it about this stronger hand in the Brexit talks?
I'm so glad you asked that particular question, because I think aside from the 47 million voting Britons who will be asking themselves that today in a very personal manner in front of the ballot box, you've also got a lot of people outside of the United Kingdom who are wondering what this election really is about. Was it about naked political opportunism on the part of the Conservative Party, Theresa May, who, remember, she came to power after David Cameron stepped down after losing the Brexit referendum, during which he campaigned for the UK to stay inside the EU. The UK, as we well know by now, voted to leave the EU. And a lot of people are thinking outside of the UK, is this about Brexit? Is it about domestic issues like, for instance, the health service, about the economy, about security after this country has faced 3 terrorist attacks? Remember, Theresa May is dealing with a lot of these things as an unelected Prime Minister, and she said what she wants to do is get a stronger mandate, get more seats in Parliament so she has a stronger hand for Brexit negotiations. The Labour Party, throughout the course of this campaign, as have other parties like the Liberal Democrats, have repeatedly tried to say, well, this should also be an election about domestic issues. The Labour Party in particular wants to end the age of austerity that the Conservatives have been famous for since 2010. They want to invest more in healthcare, invest more in the economy, also controversially nationalise some key industries. And when it comes to the Liberal Democrats, they just want a complete reversal on the Brexit issue. They want a second referendum because they're determined to try and keep this country inside the EU.
But it's obvious that the election results will have implications on the Brexit talks, or?
Yes, it will, and let's talk about some of those potential results that we could see. So remember that you've got 650 seats that are up for grabs in Westminster, including, as I said, this one here in Kilburn and Hampstead, just one of those constituencies. This one is actually a Labour constituency, but there's only a 2-point difference between Labour and Conservatives based on the last 2015 vote, so who knows which way it could go. You've got to get 326 seats and above to win the election, but the number of seats above that indicates the majority, and that is what Theresa May has been gambling on. The Conservative Party currently have a majority of about 17 seats. She wants to beef that up significantly to maybe 50, even 90 seats. If it turns out she gets less than 17, this big political gamble could actually cost her her own political career in the worst case scenario. She could face a challenge from more radical members of her own party. She could face her hand weakened, even though she stays on as Prime Minister, when it comes to negotiating for those Brexit negotiations. We also face the possibility of the Conservative Party just not getting a majority and there being a hung parliament. In that case, we could see horse trading for coalition building between, say, the Labour Party, Liberal Democrats, and also the Scottish National Party that, just like the Lib Dems, do not want this country to leave the EU.
So we have two main candidates battling for number 10, Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn. What are the market's views on these two main candidates?
Well, voters across this country and people across the markets will often say that, well, some of these parts of these campaigns have been fought on very much a negative footing, if you like, just like what we call Project Fear here going into the EU referendum, where the Remain campaign, led by David Cameron, very much vocalised negative scenarios about how Britons would be much worse off if they voted to leave the EU. Or likewise, we've had Theresa May running a very negative campaign against Jeremy Corbyn, saying that if he were to be voted in tandem with other parties that he'd have to form a coalition for, well, he would have a so-called coalition of chaos. He would be wanting to, as she put it, shake the magic money tree to find more money, borrow more money, to, as I said, controversially renationalise key industries like the railways, the power grid. That'll be very expensive. He also wants to provide free childcare for 1.3 million children across Britain, but finding the money for these kind of things at a time like this is going to be expensive. So the markets could get nervous about the prospect of a Corbyn-led coalition spending an awful lot more at a time when still the world economy is looking a little bit shaky. On the other hand, they're also particularly nervous about a so-called hard Brexit coming from Theresa May. So, and the lack of clarity over her negotiating strategy is a worry for companies across the UK. So either way, perhaps one can expect some weakness in the pound, whether it's immediate or whether it's further down the line.
Nina dos Santos, thanks very much for talking to us.
Thank you.